I am honored and happy to be here on this special occasion. Trey called me about a week ago and said that, Dave, the Dave Duerson Foundation was going to do some good here in Chicago. And he asked me would I be a part of it. I said, are you kidding? I mean, there's no way that I wouldn't be. Dave was not only a great teammate of mine, he was a great friend of mine. I mean, Alicia as well. We shared a lot of great moments together on and off the field. Our families, we just basically, I spent more time with Dave than I did with my brothers. And we just had a tremendous commitment to be the best that we can be. And unfortunately at the end, he succumbed to, the life of the NFL, with this concussion thing. But in the midst of tragedy, there's always some good that comes out of it. And for them to really keep the Dave Duerson Foundation going strong, I commend the family, and I'll let them, talk about that a little bit later. But I'm going to do everything in my power to help Trey and the Duerson family to, number one, keep the great legacy and great work that he's done in the game of football going. I mean, and what they're trying to do, I think, is important because the jury is still out. I mean, we know that there's a problem, but we have to figure out a way where we can minimize, the injuries in, number one, in football. Because, I mean, the game we love, what we sacrificed for this game. I thank God that I got out healthy and, I can still remember stuff and still get up without some assistance. But there's others that are less fortunate, and we're going to make sure that, number one, these young people understand, although this is a game, that you have to take care of yourself to try to minimize what's going on in football and just really create that awareness, because it's always been back in my day, is suck it up, keep going, and you create a situation where we are today. But this is a new day, and this is a great moment where the Duerson family is coming together to do something for these Chicago kids. And I am honored and proud to introduce Trey Duerson, which I watched him grow up. I mean, turn into a great young man. I love him dearly. Trey, you got the floor, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, Otis. Otis has been a tremendous friend to my family while my father was alive, and especially since his death. So, Otis, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here this morning and enduring this heat. Also, thank you to the Whitney Young football team for representing the CPS football programs. Seeing the Whitney Young team without their pads on reminds me of a time during my childhood when my brothers and I played football against my father and two-hand touch. Now, we were the offense, and of course, he was the defense. Now, in one particular play, I ran the ball, and his two-hand touch came with more force than both of us had imagined. I hit the ground. Then he came over to me and said, "Son, how many fingers am I holding up?" Now, we all know that the old saying of how many fingers is flawed, to say the least. But Dad may have been onto something. That fundamentally, when a concussion occurs, our vision is impaired. Thankfully, with the advances in neurology, we no longer have to rely on intuition. We now have an effective concussion screening tool called the King-Devick test. With this test, we can address a vital question of the concussion problem. That question is when to remove an athlete from play. Now, currently, the concussion awareness is at an all-time high, but what remains unclear are the solutions. Now, in my opinion, there are three key solution areas. First, reduction in hitting. Across football leagues across all levels, we have seen coaches commit to reduce hitting in practices. This will limit exposure to unnecessary and possible concussive blows. Two, return to play. With the passage of state legislation, student athletes that are concussed will now have to be cleared by a medical professional before returning to participation. This is vital because if an athlete receives a concussion, it doesn't give his brain enough time to heal. He's very vulnerable to developing a brain disease if he sustains another hit. And lastly, three, remove from play. Now, I believe this is the area where we least understand. At times, our athletes can fail to recognize that they've suffered a concussion, and our medical personnel in the field can fail to determine concussion symptoms. Now, for us to fix this problem, we will have to diagnose more concussions. With the King-Devick test, it will be a helpful aid in securing this critical area. And that is why my family chose to donate this test. Now, when I think of my father and the disease he suffered, I often think of the concussions that went undiagnosed. And that, again, goes to the significance of the King-Devick test. Now, following the death of my father, my family and I were given a significant gift from science. Through the findings of Boston University, they concluded that he suffered from a brain disease related to concussions. Now, these findings gave us the gift of clarity, they gave us the gift of context, and they gave us answers to many questions that used to keep us up at night. And in receiving that incredible gift from science, my family and I feel compelled to give back. We are committed to reducing the risk of others developing the brain disease that my father endured, and it is our hope that my father's death will not be in vain. This donation is one of our efforts to ensure that my father's life and death provide greater meaning and greater context to a challenging problem. I know that he is looking down on us now with his big smile, heavy mustache, and Cuban cigar, hoping that his struggles will inspire safety for others. So it is a great pleasure to donate the King-Devick test to the Chicago Public Schools, and I thank them for accepting my family's donation. And here to accept that donation is Mr. Calvin Davis.
Good morning. The Chicago Public Schools is grateful to Treg Duerson, the entire Duerson family, and the Dave Duerson Foundation for this generous donation. The work of this foundation assures that Dave Duerson's spirit will live on, not just in the hearts of his fans, but for generations of young athletes who will play with greater safety. Today, we kick off a new season of high school football. Chicago is home to some incredible high school football programs, and our schools are filled with many talented athletes. A game of football is undoubtedly a rough and hard-fought competition, and while the atmosphere in the stands is exciting, we are determined to keep our players on the field safe and sound. Last year, the Board of Education took decisive action to protect students from concussion injuries. Our district adopted a new concussion management policy that's built around educating coaches about head injuries. Under this policy, we've been actively training our coaches and athletic directors in concussion management. The King-Devick test that the Duerson Foundation is helping us implement this school year is yet another tool for our coaches to keep students safe. Concussions can pose both short and long-term risks to our students, and these kits will help to identify head injuries as early as possible. We appreciate the generosity of the Duerson family and look forward to an exciting and safe new high school football season. Thank you.
So the 80 tests are going to go to the 80 high school football programs in the CPS, and that should cover all the teams in CPS on the high school level. Now, how we're going to implement this is we're going to coordinate with the CPS as far as training, and through the Dave Duerson Foundation, as well as with Steve Devick and Len Mesner and the Illinois Eye Institute, we will give training to one designated individual from each high school to learn how to administer the test. Then that individual will go back to their high school and baseline each individual athlete.
As Treg mentioned, it's a fairly straightforward test. It takes less than 2 minutes to perform. One of the advantages of the test is that it can be done by non-medically trained personnel. The learning curve is really pretty quick, and we're happy to be participating in training the coaches, the athletic departments, and the other individuals on the staff in the sideline administration of the test. I think that's a critical element, is that this is a test that is designed to be accomplished on the sideline without without a lot of extensive technology and taking the individual to another facility. And the question is really, what are the mechanics of the test, the biomechanics, and how does it work? When you think about concussion and how it impacts the brain, it's well established that one of the most vulnerable parts of the brain that is affected by concussion is the frontal area. It's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And it's been well established that this area is one of the most vulnerable in the setting of concussion. It also happens that this is the part of the brain that is responsible for the initiation of eye movements. We call these micro eye movements saccades. So it's entirely reasonable. That's what led us to move in this direction, that injury to this area resulting in concussion should affect a disturbance in eye movement function or oculomotor function. So the King-Devick test relies on a concept that's termed rapid number naming. And it's a simple test. It's a simple protocol. Maybe. Yeah, sure. The test is a 3-card test, and it's simply a matter of asking the individual athlete to read from left to right the numbers as quickly as they can without making any mistakes. Now, before this is done in the setting of concussion, a baseline is established. So the baseline is established as part of the pre-athletic physical examination or something like that. And very simply, it's just a matter of the individual reading from left to right as quickly as they can. There are 3 cards, and they become progressively more difficult. The first card, you can see that there are lines in between the numbers. The second card, the lines are removed. And the third card, the lines are removed and the spacing of the numbers is a bit more random. So very simply, it's a time test. It's an aggregate time of the amount of time it takes the individual to read card 1, card 2, card 3. Now, to establish a baseline, we do the test twice. We find that generally people do a little bit better. They go a little bit quicker the second time around. What we found through a variety of clinical trials is that in the setting of concussion, that their time goes up, meaning that it takes them longer to do the test. So essentially, any deviation, any increase in the amount of time that it takes in order to complete the test is determined to be abnormal. And that's an indicator for the coach very simply, or the athletic personnel to very simply remove the athlete from play.
You know, teams from the NHL and schools like Notre Dame and Florida and really many schools are using it. And yes, it's a time test, and it's a tough diagnosis to make a concussion on the sidelines. So this is just an objective measure, and typically a kid will tell you that he feels fine when he's hit. That's just a very typical reaction when you have a head injury. And we always laugh when somebody's got a broken leg, they never say they feel fine, but with concussions they do. And so this is just a objective test. It's a tool that should be used with any other tools available, but it's a tough diagnosis to make without an objective test. So you have their baseline. Let's say it took them 50 seconds to do it before the game. They're doing it in 60 seconds. When your axons are stretched in your brain, you can't transmit signals as fast, so you can't name these numbers as fast. It's really that simple. Why did I what? Not.
The origins of the test.
Well, what I'll tell you, the background is that this has been for many years kind of a gold standard dyslexia test. This has been a test that measures your ability as your eyes move relative to reading. And a couple of years ago, some researchers in New Zealand found that post-concussion syndrome, where the symptoms last for a long time, like Sidney Crosby has, one of the few physical signs was that these saccadic eye movements, which this test measures, were defective. So I theorized that maybe this test would screen for concussions on the sidelines. So I took it to the chairman of neurology at Penn, which was recognized then as the best neurology school, and College of Medicine, and they thought it may work. And there's been 4 published studies in the last year in elite neurology peer-reviewed journals that show that it's just really simple. You can't read those numbers as fast when you have a concussion. So that's the origin of the test. And basically, you see the numbers. This is the demo card. Okay. So you can see you're supposed to read them left to right, line to line. You want to go as fast as you can without making mistakes. And when you flip to the next card, I'll start the timer.
I'll evaluate it for future use.
So flip the next card to the next card, not this one, and start reading right up here whenever you're ready.
Okay. 67425 605
Right, that's it. Now, typically you do it a lot faster than that. So, okay. 184, you could do it that fast. Okay. You want to do it as fast as you can without any errors.
Okay.
701-84-8207-9-75629-84361-510-760-83560-07567. So that's really the speed you want to go, and then there's one more card, and you still want to go as fast as you can without making mistakes.
Okay. 1-974-8-642-7, 29372-51760-94028-19780-38536.
And we do it the second time, and you'll do it a lot faster because you were kind of didn't see what I was looking for on the first card. And they do it fast. So, and then if you had a head injury potentially, if you go to the sidelines, you'll read it slower because you can't read it as fast. So that's just an indicator that you should come out of the game.
Yeah,
and be evaluated further. Yeah, it used to be a reading test, and now it's they found that it'll screen for concussions. Okay, so that's cool.